Welcome back to the Allegheny Northern in N scale, and we are finally going to take a little break away from trying to make the railroad run flawless, and we're actually going to build something. And today we're going to do a two-part, two-structure kit here, and it includes Hydrocal casting pieces, wood pieces, there's some styrene, there's a lot of different pieces in this kit. And so if you've never built one of these before, they go together pretty well, but the techniques are a little bit different, so I thought I'd do a video for you. And this is entitled Easy Come, Easy Go. It is a strip club and a mortuary, and if you did not get that play on words, you probably need to go ask your parents what that means. But let's go ahead and get started. We'll open up the kit here, which you can see is still in the plastic, and lay the parts out and get ready to rock. Okay, when you open the kit and you take all the parts and pieces out, no, I didn't show you opening up the kit. I think at this point you guys all know that you have to open the box and then take the stuff out of the box to work with it. So I don't really understand the purpose of unboxing videos, because you're going to buy the thing and you're worried about what's in the thing, not, the box. But whatever, I digress. So in any event, okay, we've got this is just a sheet of paper with some, I'm not going to call them decals, or if you're in Canada and can't pronounce that, you call them decals. They're not decals, they're just printed out on paper, but they're going to work for what we need. I'll show you that in a minute. We've got the Hydrocal castings. They are two buildings that are the same, so it doesn't really matter how you do that. Then we've got some wood pieces here, some more castings for the chimneys. We have acetate for the windows and some styrene, which I'm assuming is going to be for canopies, but I have not read the directions yet, so I don't know what we're doing with that. And then of course we do get the directions, and they are just printed out and everything's stuffed inside the box. I've never had an issue following these instructions. Obviously, when you've got a four-wall structure, it's not too hard to figure out how it goes together, but they do give you pretty much written out how this goes together. And then there's some photographs here on the back, which is probably more helpful to most of us as far as putting it together. And you can see how the paper decals go on and some color suggestions. Now, I actually like the color suggestions that they are using, so I'm not going to be too original here. I am pretty much going to make a variation of that. So the club's going to be a redder, warmer color, and then the mortician's office is going to be a dark, cool blue. So that's, we're just going to continue on playing on this theme. So let's go ahead and look at the kit. So you've got to clean up these parts and pieces because they're a little rough around the edges, and they won't join quite right because you've got some extra, we'll call it extra plaster there, some extra Hydrocal. Cleans up real nice and easy with a hobby knife. It does make a mess though, so what I'm going to do here is try to contain that mess, because I just cleaned the hobby mat, and boy, I really don't want to do it again. And so once we get ourselves situated here and the camera stationary, it's, as you would expect, you're just going to take a hobby knife and you're going to clean up the bits that need cleaned up. And be careful, because you don't want to rub out any of the details that's in the plaster. If you do on accident, you can always put it back in with a knife, but it's just easier if you are careful when you're cleaning up the molds. And we're going to use a little different technique putting this together, because I'm sure all of you know that like super glue and stuff like that, yes, you could use it, but boy, it's really a waste of super glue. We are going to use standard Elmer's white glue. Nothing fancy to it. Because the Hydrocal is so porous, that white glue is going to stick right in there. And we're not going to use the school glue. If you got school glue, that's not the stuff to use. It's just not as good as the glue all. And if you're in an area that you can't get it, then look for it online. It just holds better, and it doesn't break down as easy. So I've tried this from experience, and I'm sure you guys have heard about it online, so it's nothing new. I don't worry about cleaning up the back of the walls. You're not going to see it. There's no actual open windows on these structures, so it doesn't really matter what the inside looks like. And I don't recommend painting any pieces before you put them together, just because we want them to be open and porous, because that's going to be how we're going to glue them together. All right, I'm going to finish cleaning up these pieces, which, as you can see, is nothing too exciting, and we'll come back here when it's time to glue them together. Okay, so after you have knocked down the big overcastings, grab one of the side walls and one of the end walls, and if you look, you'll see that there's end wall detail here on the side, and then one of these sides will have detail on the end, and one of them won't. So the ones that don't are the ones that get buried. And if you look like this at the joint, you can kind of see there's still a little bit of a joint there, even though we've cleaned it up with a knife. So what I'm going to do is take a sanding block and ever so gently just clean up the edge a little bit. I'm trying to get a little snugger fit, and if it, it's not going to fit perfect, you're still dealing with Hydrocal castings here, but you can get it reasonably close. And if it doesn't go all the way together like you would like it, we can always come back with a little bit of Hydrocal later and patch it. But I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think that's going to be necessary. We'll see once we get detailed here. Once again, make sure you're sanding the right spots. You don't want to accidentally sand off some detail. And that looks like we're going to get about as decent a fit as we're going to get. It's pretty smooth in there, so that's just going to be how she is, I think. Which is not terrible. So, okay, that's going to be our fit. And what I do want to do is check and make sure I'm putting this on the right side, that this is a foundation block and not a capstone. And let's see here. It does appear that, well, that actually doesn't help us. So let me look at the directions here and see if it tells us which way is up. And I was right. I had it the right way. So how about that? It's almost like I know buildings or something. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a generous amount of white glue. Now, because this Hydrocal is porous, it is going to soak up the white glue pretty good. And that's great for the bonding. And it also is great because it doesn't take a whole lot of time to do it. So we're going to bond it. Don't worry if it oozes. I want it to ooze. I want to make sure I get a lot of glue in here. And then I'm just going to set this down. And you can see I'm going to set this up here, but it's not going to move on us. It'll dry pretty fast as the Hydrocal sucks up the moisture in that glue. And just make sure you get your walls straight, because it's kind of a pain if you don't. And once you've got that kind of the way you want it. Unfortunately, there's not a real good way to the model's not going to line itself up. So to get square, you either need to use something that is square, that you know is square, or you need to be very, very good at putting these things together. So I would recommend getting something that is square to keep them square. But in any event, that's all there is for putting it together. So I'm going to do that a handful of times more, and then we'll come back. Okay, so if you did everything right, you should get a structure that looks just like this. And you also probably know that I am totally BSing you. You probably got a structure that looks a little more like that. And maybe like that. And no matter how much sanding and grinding you do, you're going to get these edges and they look like crap. So you can do a couple of things. You can mix yourself up some Hydrocal plaster, you can mix yourself up some spackling, or you can use Vallejo. That is number, looks like 70.400. It is a plastic putty. And I like this stuff because it is, it's really easy to paint with acrylics. And all I'm going to do is take this, and I'm going to run a small bead down the length of the structure here. Okay, so after you've run that bead down, you're going to get kind of a messy blob that looks like this. Just take your finger and clean that edge up. And if you got a little more than you needed, you can always just go on to the next joint and get started back there. You don't want to fill in the details, so be careful how sloppy you get with it. And if you do like I did here and get a little too sloppy, just clean it up real quick before you get too far along and it sets into the cracks. Now, obviously the brick detail here, we don't want to hide it, so I'm going to clean up my joint as much as I can. And then I'm going to take my hobby knife and I'm just going to lightly score the smoothed out lines of the brick in here. Not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better than having a smooth, obvious flat spot on the side of your model. And you get something that looks just like that. And at that point, you're done. Go ahead, let it dry. And we are going to come back in time to get painted. Okay, you can try super hard, but inevitably when it comes time to put on the roof, your building is not going to be perfectly square, and your perfectly square piece of styrene is not going to fit. And so it's purposely oversized just a smidgen so that it fits a little bit big so that you can make it fit a little bit not big. So what I have found the easiest way to do that is set your plastic down on the ground and then flip your building upside down, lining up the roof slab on the inside like so. And once you've got it, I'm going to offset you here just a minute so I can actually see. Once you get it pretty much where you need it, you're going to take a small pencil and outline where those walls are. All right. And actually don't follow your, you did what I did, don't follow the curved line because you're going to be very disappointed if you have a curved roof. All right. And so that kind of gives you the outline of where you need to cut. Now, you can do this many different ways. It doesn't matter which way you do it, it's going to make a mess. And what I prefer to do is take one of these handy dandy little razor saws and score this thing so that I know exactly where to cut it, and I can make sure that it's straight and true. And they give you a pretty thick piece of plastic, which is great because it's going to add some rigidity to your structure. Even though the Hydrocal is pretty well jointed, this is just going to help all that much more. Okay, so between the sanding of the Hydrocal that you did and now the cutting of this plaster, or this plastic, your workbench is going to look like a Biden family party with all this white dust all over the place. So it's really important before you get to your painting that you clean that up, because you don't brush off the model. Just make sure it's not getting in anything, because it'll funk up your finish. So that's one thing that you don't really have that problem too often with like a Walther's kit, but when you're dealing with this one where you got a lot of customizing and especially sanding of that Hydrocal, just makes a mess. So once you have, you can cut all the way through with this thing if you want, but it does, like I said, it does make a mess. So what I do is I get it to the point where I know my knife will stay in that score line, and then I just run my knife straight through it. Just like that. Okay, and then you can go in and clean up your edges as you need to, but you're going to do that on all 3 or 4 sides, whatever needs trimmed. Okay, to actually put the roof in, I don't do anything special. I just come in here with some white glue in the four corners once the roof is dropped in. And that's going to set up how I want the glue. Flip this thing over. And of course the this roof is a little bit looser than the last one. If it is, you can put some strip styrene underneath it, or you can do what I'm going to do and set it on its side to dry and let it go. I'm not going to worry about the glue goobers there, because what we're about to do in the next step is going to hide all of that. This is really just here to hold up what I'm actually going to make the roofing material out of. So we'll let this dry in this position, and when it's done, gonna look like that. And that's our box ready for painting and detailing. Okay, so our next step here is we want to go ahead and get primed, and it's nothing exciting. I'm using Vallejo 73.600. It is a white surface primer. I've mixed it with a little bit of airbrush thinner and a little bit of flow improver, but other than that, nothing else. And I'm gonna give it a nice coat here. The idea is I've got different materials, right? I've got the plastic, I've got the Hydrocal. I'm gonna eventually have wood and some other plastic pieces. And what happens is they all take paint differently. So by priming, we make the porosity of the material all the same. And that's a big college word there for you. But basically, it's gonna let us do the even coats of paint later that we want, and that'll also help the plaster and the patching all absorb at the same time. So I'm gonna go ahead and spray that, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about colors. Okay, so one of the buildings is going to be a red building, and one is going to be a more gray blue kind of color. So I am using Vallejo Model Air. Gray blue is number 71005, and obviously this is going to be the mortuary building. And we're just going to go ahead and apply this. I'm using an airbrush. You can use a brush if you so desire. Doesn't really matter. But just make sure you get a nice even coat. Don't hide the brick detail because you're going to want that to show through. So whatever you're doing, make sure that you still see your brick. And I'm going to go ahead and give everything a nice coat here. And this is just a first coat. We'll go back and do the detail work later. So now we are at the point here where we're getting ready to wrap this thing up, and we're down to the weathering. So, a couple of highlights on the installation of the decals or the cutout paper signs, whatever you want to call them. Once you get them on and in position, I hit it with one more coat of dull coat just to kind of seal everything together. I only sprayed the sides where the signs were, so if there wasn't a sign, I didn't bother spraying it again. And make sure you get the glue, like I was showing in the process there, and I scraped it real clean against the back. So you want to make sure you cover every edge, all the corners. Otherwise, the paper won't stick to the flat against the end. And what'll happen is you'll get an unrealistic lift somewhere, and you don't want that. So you want it to sit flat, and you don't want a ton of glue there. You want enough to saturate the paper, but not so much that it oozes out all over the place and makes a mess. So just a couple of things. On the doors, so just painting that black, gives you a nice little reflection with the plastic there. Because the doors are self-adhesive, they'll hold the acetate and themselves right there. You don't need to add any more wood glue, which is pretty nice. And you get a glazing effect on the doors without being able to see in, because of course there's no inside. So that's how this goes together. Now the next step I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take some pan pastels, and I'm going to weather up the buildings, and then a final coat of dull coat, and we are done. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that step, how I weathered it. Obviously, there were other signs and decals on the paper that you could use if you so wanted to. So, the choice is yours. And so too for the weathering, depending on how beat up you want this to look. We've already got kind of a worn look with the paints, but we're just going to finalize that and give it a little bit more weathering. So let's go ahead and do that, and that's going to be it for building a Hydrocal kit. If you have any questions on how this kit went together, or how these kits go together, or anything that you've struggled with these, they're pretty straightforward. They're just kind of fun because they're not plastic and they're not wood. They're something totally different, so you get this sort of interesting media to put a building together. But it does work, and it looks pretty good. Takes the paint well. So if you see these kits in the hobby shop and you're thinking they might be kind of interesting to build, I definitely recommend you give them a shot.